Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, the official podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. I'm your host, Todd McCartney, and tonight's episode, number 52, is 20 questions, where we're going to be answering those questions that have been sitting burning holes in our mailbag, and also questions that we specifically asked via social media that you wanted answered. So, sitting in with me, as always, is Mr. Brian P. Miles. How you doing tonight, Brian?
Greetings and salutations from Philadelphia, a city where far more of the scenes in American adventure are set than any other.
You got a dominant factor there, don't you? It's a little dominant.
Absolutely.
And coming to us from the Rubber City capital, Mr. JT Cougar. How are you doing tonight, JT?
I am great. I had a mission.
Oh.
I've been meaning to stop when I haven't had the kids to see if...
You had a mission problems?
No, I had a mission for myself. I'm going to do it, and I will let everybody know if the speed ramps are still in the old Goodyear World headquarters. And every time I drive by, I'm like, I got to pull over. They're putting an ice cream stand in there, some other stuff. You know, I got to see if it's still there. So
all right,
it's going to be soon.
All right, good. We'll have a speed ramp update. And coming in from Tampa, not battening down the hatches this year just yet, but still in the maybe eventual wake of a little bit of rain and wind coming your way, Mr. Hal Bowers in Tampa.
Hey, aloha everybody. And yes, by time this airs, I'll either be alive or dead. So well, this is a crapshoot tonight.
That's literally true of all of us.
That's true. That's true.
Last year at this time, you had to evacuate to higher ground. So hoping all
He's
that
going to hunker down this year.
Yeah, we're just waiting to see what happens.
Stay put. Well, it's coming from the other side, not as bad.
Exactly. So, we'll have the amount of rain that we normally have this time of year. Maybe we'll see. And sorry for those of you that are listening that may have been devastated by the storm that's going to happen. My apologies, but we'll probably be sitting pretty.
We laugh in the face of tragedy, Hal. That's how we cope with it. And Todd, even though you don't do your own kind of greeting for these things, I mean, you're recording remotely tonight from an undisclosed location.
I am. I am hunkered down in a remote location in northern New Hampshire.
Are you with Dick Cheney?
Camp David.
Camp David. It is our lake house up in northern New Hampshire, so we're up here for the Labor Day
which
weekend.
You can rent, by the way.
Yes.
He can give you the rental information if you're interested.
You can. If you want to rent the Retro WDW Northern headquarters, it's twinpinechalet.com, so you can check that out. Yeah.
Now, what's interesting, though, is, like, would there be any remnants of a McCartney there? Like, if I'm a super fan of the show, would I know it was
if you know, I
there?
think we can certainly leave something for the fans.
Oh,
so
some secret fan?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like geocaching.
That's exactly. If you
I'm picturing the Stranger Things where he's leaving the Eggos in the woods. And Todd leaves some old ephemera out in a box. And
there's a topical reference that someone listening 30 years from now will be like, what was he talking about?
What is he talking about? Exactly. So, all right. Well, we've got a lot to go over, and this episode is really to the listener. So, questions that you've got and different corrections coming in. So, as always, we're going to start with corrections. We'll hit listener mail and then get to the main topic, which is even more questions from you guys, the listener.
So we have our first anonymous source, which is fantastic.
I wish we could blur their faces and do the 2020.
Yeah. So they were. This person was kind of pointing out a couple interesting things about some of our pieces. Go on and listen to our backlog of older episodes and had some notes that he gave me. So here's one thing. We were talking about the third floor of the Contemporary and like what the heck is on that thing. And we talked about the gym and some offices. But the thing that we completely missed is that the third floor of the Contemporary actually houses the bathrooms for Chef Mickey's. And I've never eaten there, so I didn't realize that.
I've never eaten there.
Now, wait a second.
They shepherd you up there if you got to
See, that's the thing. I was wondering. I was just there. I mean, like a month ago. You take the elevator to the 3rd floor. You're there. You wander. It dead ends. Like, you know what I mean? Like I hooked a right, and I passed these offices. I got stopped by somebody saying, "Do you need help?" I was like, "Nah, I just wandered." And that was it. Like there was nowhere else to go. So I don't know. Maybe it's on the 3rd floor, but it's
separate corridor.
It's got to be, So it's access from the 4th floor. So if you're in Chef Mickey's and you walk towards the window, like out where that little overhang
glass,
is, that was Coquino Cove.
Where Coquino Cove.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. And you go to the right. There's these signs that say bathrooms downstairs, and you go down a set of stairs. Like it's some sort of janky, like 1960s restaurant, and
it's
the rest
1960s restaurant,
and the bathrooms are there. So I thought that was absolutely fascinating.
So that I have to explain that reference. Leslie Nielsen hosted Saturday Night Live in like 1990 or 91, and one of the skits was the 1960s movie. And it started, it's the 1960s movie. It's the movie from 2 decades ago. They all had weird, wacky theme songs and titles like these. And the whole skit was a spoof of the zany 1960s comedies. So I highly recommend finding the Leslie Nielsen, probably promoting Naked Gun 2.5.
I was wondering what the promotion
on Saturday Night Live. So there's your non sequitur.
Excellent.
So you get on steps to go to the bathroom at...
Yeah, tell us more about this, Hal.
Yeah, so next time we're going to go.
Yeah.
We're going to have to make a pilgrimage.
When you have to go, we're going to go.
Yeah, so I'll just bust through there anyways. Do you have reservations? No.
You don't have to. You just look like you ran out for something and you like
That's true.
Walk by the host stand. I mean, it's not the Secret Service. They're not going to tackle you.
You put your head down, you act like you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. Stops you.
Right.
Can
I don't have to get a clipboard.
Here? Yeah.
I don't have to get a clipboard and a short haircut and a name tag. And
you slide into that bathroom like a chest of drawers.
I also have something secret that I think we'll eventually reveal about the contemporary. I haven't told you guys yet, but I got something up on my sleeve.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So that's that. So then in our episode about the Hotel Plaza Boulevard, we neglected to mention that the Reedy Creek Improvement District was housed in the Preview Center building before they got their own building there on property, which I had forgotten about. So yeah, for a while after the Preview Center was over, they used it for that too. So thank you. That was great. When we were talking about touchscreen technology in our Communicore, we were talking about how you didn't actually touch the screens. They weren't like the ones today. They actually had like these invisible beams of light with sensors that would go across the front and make kind of a grid.
Right.
And we said like, oh, well, nobody uses that anymore. Turns out we were wrong. That technology is actually still in use today at the Haunted Mansion. So if you're out in the interactive queue and you're at the tomb that plays music where you like sort of touch the different things.
Yeah.
That same kind of infrared system is actually still at work today. And there's an emitter on one side and a receiver on the other side.
Yeah.
And it makes a grid pattern, and that's how it knows how you touch things. So
that is pretty cool.
Isn't that cool?
It's like,
you mean the trumpet's not actually being
by ghosts? Or it's just done with ghosts, as Tony Baxter said.
That's right. That's cool. And how you had some not only your own corrections, but additional correction or information about Horizons too, right?
Yeah, so this was a cool one. So Ryan Ritchie, one of our listeners, he sent me a YouTube video that we'll put the link in the show notes.
This is really cool.
And they actually used the Choose Your Future endings in the exit of Star Tours. There's some TVs, and they put them in the TV as if they are like other places that you could potentially go and visit, kind of the way. At least I assume that's what it is, because I don't speak Japanese, so I'm not really sure what they're saying. But I'm assuming that they're pretending to be other destinations, kind of like when you're in the queue here, they have like the other destinations that are up on the screen where they show like Hoth and Dagobah and things.
So what you're saying is that if I pilot the Millennium Falcon, maybe I can take it to Mesa Verde.
Maybe.
That would be cool.
And you're right, Todd. There's one more about Horizon. So Alex Lewis sent this to us. And I actually didn't know this because I've never walked into Star Wars Launch Bay. But apparently, if you go into the Star Wars launch bay, there's like this 7-foot-long logo by a register, and the design of it is an homage to the Horizons logo.
That's
so
cool.
So that's neat. I had no idea that was in there.
See, another Star Wars I'm seeing the Carousel Progress family might really be, they might be from a galaxy far, far away.
maybe in the refurb it's going to become like Baru and Owen Lars having problems with
the last scene. We know what that'll be. The song's not being sung.
It's just
stormtroopers come in and clear out the room.
Just all the smoke.
Just there's smoking skeletons at the end and all that.
Wait, Luke, it's too dangerous.
Oh, we're
bad.
sorry we've killed you, the Carousel of Progress family.
All right, well, Hal, thanks for those corrections and those anonymous pieces of information. All awesome things. We're tying a lot of different episodes together here, which is pretty cool. So, all right, JT. So over to the mail bag, getting pretty full. You've got a lot of things coming out and stuffed into that bag. What do we got this month?
Okay, a few things here. I don't want to step on the toes of the main topics. We'll walk this fine line. The first one. We actually discussed this before we started the show, and we're going to iron this out because I know this has come up not just from Mr. Williams here, but from a few others. He says he was listening to a show we posted where you play a couple of the Walt Disney World radio loops, and we was just wondering if there's any chance we could have the part 2 to that series of shows anytime soon. And we kind of went through this. We found that we have a lot of these loops, I think, just archived, saved and stuff, and we're going to sort of officially release them, right?
Yeah, we have a couple to release. We're going to review what we've got and what we already put out there. We've got about 6 or so total. Some of them are more of the Welcome Center in Ocala. So we'll go through those. I know we do have one more official radio loop that was either 2 years after or prior to the one we already released. So we'll get those out there as a mini episode and relatively soon for you. So stay tuned. Haha, get it? Stay tuned.
See that.
Yeah, see what it did.
Well, it was always AM radio, wasn't it?
It was AM, yeah. I don't think how you were in the area more often than us. Was there any FM? Was the Ocala one still AM as well? They probably mentioned it in the actual recording. We could listen.
Yeah, I think it was all AM. FM stations are expensive. AM's super cheap. So
True.
I suspect there's a segment of our listeners under 25 who are saying, "What are they talking about?"
You want to explain it?
That's true. Terrestrial radio. What is that, right?
I'll tell you what. I think wasn't there a sign, one of those brown rectangle signs that said "tune" to?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
We've
seen that in a few of our
Hal, right there. I want that.
That would
on
be
a shirt.
that would be a good shirt.
I think we shared that recording too. Somebody recorded that loop.
Yes, the radio.
We just need to put them all on one.
I think.
Episode, I think.
Yeah, the episode had an Ocala loop as well as that.
You know what? We should just buy an AM radio station within distance of Walt Disney World and just start running the stuff on a loop.
There is an event idea. I'm not even kidding. You can get an FM transmitter, illegally run it for an hour, and say, "Hey, give it to our."
Just bring your car down.
If you're pulling up to Disney from 6 to 9 p.m.,
you're gonna hear this.
We'll start a pirate radio station on the former Discovery Island. And they'll never find us.
I heard that the 3-day pass is $29.95 plus tax. I heard it on the radio this morning on the way in.
We'll put gorilla signs up. Tune your radios.
That's right.
Awesome.
So, what else you got in there, JT?
Michelle B. wrote in and she said, "Thanks for the memories. We stayed at the golf resort December 1976 for the 4th annual Walter Hagen National Championship that my dad and his friends played in. They came in next to last. Hey, at least they're in contention, kind of. She was 10 years old, but didn't think the pool was all that cool, just rectangular. So they walked to the Polynesian and fell in love with their pool and the waterfall and slide." So we've talked about these two.
The mozzarella sticks.
Come on, man. Yeah, you had mozzarella sticks showering water down upon you, even though you didn't know what a mozzarella stick was then.
That's true. Nobody knew what it was. You know, there is something about water cascading down on a pool. And Brian, I think you'll know what I mean and how as well when I say this. Those fountains were extremely reminiscent of those fountains that you found in malls in the 60s and 70s, right? And as a kid, you were like, on a hot day, if you're at the mall, you're like, I want to just jump in that. So getting into the golf resort pool was kind of like a dream come true if you ever wanted to swim in a mall fountain.
I would have been whipped if I ever jumped into a fountain at a mall, so that thought never crossed my mind.
I'm not saying I did. I'm just saying there was, a very similar design, right? You always,
I agree.
in the middle of a pool, you always put something
fountains
covered
in
with
malls
pebbles.
were a huge thing in the 1970s.
Absolutely.
All kinds of different configurations.
I love the ones that would come out from the center and dome out, or the fan ones that would go out.
Colored lights would light up the...
As a kid, I was enamored how the light bulbs even worked underwater. I was just dumbfounded by that. I thought that was amazing.
I still don't know how that works. Actually.
It was just like shopping in an Esther Williams movie. So
That's right.
there's a reference for all of our senior citizen fans and Michael Crawford.
There we go. But Michelle, it's great to hear from somebody who remembers staying there, and I hope you enjoyed the rooms more than the pool. So
yeah, that pool. I mean, it is cool with this monster. I did see when I was wandering around that treehouse villas that their pool is equally as lame. If you've ever seen that, it has like 4 frogs just shooting streams of water, like spitting. That's it. It's nothing fancy.
that's the end of it.
So that's going to do it for the mailbag. I'm going to close it up because we are going to slightly reopen it for the main topic. But I did want to discuss 2 things that we've been doing behind the scenes. Number 1, which we mentioned last month, is the Magic Your Band Magic Band skins. We worked with magicyourband.com to create 4 retro WDW Magic Band covers, and a few of our listeners I ran into in the parks got them sent to them. Have a Lake Buena Vista historical, retro Magic, and some retro WDW skins. So if you are a Magic Band fan, check them out, and it'll be definitely something to show off at the event in October. Go to magicyourband.com, search for retro, and you'll see the 4 things there. And I did want to mention, Brian and I sat in with Jeremy from the Disney music radio station Spectro Radio. We recorded a mini episode with him talking about everything from Retro Magic to Lake Buena Vista Historical Society and everything in between. That is going to start airing very soon here on Spectro Radio, depending on when you hear this. But check out Spectro Radio for Disney music and for us now. And for letters, letting us know what you have to say, questions, comments, concerns, podcast@retrowdw.com. Send us a email, tweet, anything. We'll possibly put you on the show with your comment, question, or anything you have to say.
Thank you much, JT. Well, it's time for this month's audio rewind. And how you've been picking these out for the past couple months as we've let people know. And again, you struck a chord in the hundreds of responses this time around. So,
wow.
You certainly found something that a lot of people had. So let's take a listen to last month's audio rewind. All right, well, if you guessed Big Al from the Country Bear Jamboree, you are correct. And we do have a winner, as always, who'll be receiving a poster and additional retro WDW swag. Congratulations to Christopher Smith. So we'll be getting those prizes out to you. And as always, we have something to give away. Do you guys have anything to add into the bag this month? I think Hal is pointing at himself.
We do. I'm going into the bag this month. No.
All right. What do we have?
No,
Hal needs a place to stay. So
Yeah.
he's coming home to you with you.
That's true. If the hurricane comes and it gets wiped out, I'll be staying with a listener chosen at random. No, we have a DVD copy of The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head to give away.
Oh, look at that.
It's a great little film. If you have not heard of this, it was an independently produced film all about what would happen if Walt Disney's head were, well, not if, because it's true, because it is still around, and they would revitalize him like every couple of years to like give guidance to the executives. But what would happen if you got out into the park for a day to see what his empire had turned into? So his intern,
and it's starring one of our retro Magic guests.
That's right. Ron Schneider plays the part of Mr. Walt Disney. So we have a lovely DVD of that to give away to a listener who can identify this song.
All right, if you think you know the answer to this month's audio rewind, send your guesses to contest@retrowdw.com. All entries must be received by October 13th, 2019. And we're giving you extra time here. Did that date ring true to anybody here? Did anybody pick up on that date?
October 13th.
I think we have a luncheon.
We do have a luncheon with some special guests. So we're giving you a little extra time because we certainly have some planning to do, which we'll talk about at the end of this episode. So you got a little extra time to get this one in.
I'm also bringing some stuff to Retro Magic, our event that you can get the last minute details. Tickets still available at retromagic.net. On Sunday, October 13th at the Contemporary Resort Hotel in the Ballroom of the Americas, a day of fun-filled, action-packed, musically inspiring Disney history love.
Extravaganza.
An extravaganza, and I am bringing some knickknacks and ephemera and things that we will give away that day.
Oh.
And at interstitials during the day's program.
There we go.
We'll come up with times where we're giving away cars and TVs and VCRs, microwaves.
We're going to give $5,000, put your head in a little bubble, and let you shop in a living room, just like Wheel of Fortune, right?
That's right. And everything you don't spend, you get to take home in a service merchandise gift certificate.
Perfect. So, and also too, Brian,
none of that's true, by the way.
That's
That's our legal disclaimer. Right. I am bringing stuff to give away, but it's none of the things we named.
We are more than halfway through hitting the maximum attendance for this event. So if you are interested in coming out, check it out at retromagic.net and get your tickets today before they are all sold out, because it's could near sell out very, very soon as we move forward here. So yeah, act now and get your tickets before they're sold out.
Because even though it sounds like there's a lot, we're trying to keep it somewhat intimate, right? It's not like a huge amount of tickets. We're not trying to it's not like D23 where people are going to be in the nosebleeds.
Right.
It's like, This is a nice, tight, intimate thing. And that's why the tickets are limited. It's like, we're not trying to make a...
Yeah, we want you to be able to interact. We want you to be able to see the VIPs and say hello to them and experience and being able to see the screen and everything like that. So a lot of exciting things.
Exactly.
All right, well, it's time for this month's main topic. And all right, so as many of our listeners know, for the past 3-4 months, we have spent a lot of time focused on Horizons, and we certainly need a break from that. And we decided, what should we do next? And Brian said, well, I'm going to work on something. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian to introduce this episode and MC us through it. This is something he's been working on and came up with, and certainly is a little bit of a change from Horizons, but I think we all need to catch a breather after many midnight oil runs. So, Brian, take it away.
Well, part of the planning of this episode revolves around the fact that we are currently, if you hadn't been listening to the previous 5 minutes, planning a ginormous event in October. So instead of an episode where we all hunker down with 57 books and websites and reviewing age-old videos and stuff to bring you a walk through a previous attraction or place in the world, our mailbag has filled up with our Twitters, our Facebooks, our Instagram messages, has filled up with questions from people. And so in talking to the fellas over the past couple of weeks, I said, why don't I assemble a list of these questions and we just bang them out one by one. Like, for those of you who can't come to Retro Magic and ask us this stuff in person, or stop us as they frequently do when they see JT in the parks wearing one of our T-shirts and say, hey, I got a question for you, Mr. Retro WDW man.
And I don't know the answer.
Yeah, you're like, I don't know. Let me message Hal and Brian and Todd. That we would accept, not only go back through our backlog of questions, and which we've done, but accept new questions from folks. So that's what we did, and you've answered with great aplomb and given us a veritable cornucopia of queries that we can answer. So without any further ado, I'm going to read the first one. I'm going to read our first query, and we're going into the Wayback Machine to our second year of existence. episode 16, we had gotten a missive from Dan Curry, who asked us at that time about recalling a tram ride through the Paris sewers. He thought it was at Epcot. Now, we did answer this partially at one time, what we thought was right, but Howard, you have new information.
Yes. One of our listeners, the same anonymous gentleman who we mentioned earlier, was kind.
Who is this man?
I know. This is
Zorro. Can we call him Zorro?
very bad.
Can he be on the show? Maybe.
He let me know that there actually is a sewer museum attraction in Paris.
How about that?
And in fact, like this thing, tours of the Parisian sewers actually dates back to the World Exposition of 1867. Because when they laid out new sewers in Paris, it was like the most modern, it was the biggest deal. So when people came from across the world to the World Exposition, it's like they wanted to see this fantastic sewer system too. So it was really a marvel of its time. And even as late as the 1970s, you could take a tour of the sewers by boat. So they would put you in a little boat and you would row
Float you down
through the sewers, which sounds fantastic.
So still not Disney related though.
No, but we do understand now why Paris was like the key, because like this was an actual thing in Paris. So they were just confused. It wasn't Paris at Epcot. It was the real Paris.
Maybe that's going to be part of this new Remy ride at Epcot. Is there's going to be like they have the ride and then maybe a walking portion where you can go through the sewers with a giant rat.
That was in the film.
Remy does go through the sewers in the movie when the ladies,
Could just-
they're the storm system, whatever that
Could
is.
just hang out by Mouse Gear and take a sniff too.
There it is. Not for too long.
We're going to come back to that too.
Yeah.
That comes back later in a future question.
So so the tour is now restricted to a small area, and unfortunately at this time it's closed because of adjacent construction. But I know if I travel to Paris, I will stop in and check it out the next time that I'm there.
Can you point me to your sewers, fella? So that is, thank you, Dan Curry. I hope you're still one of our listeners so you can hear that we've answered this question and a follow-up. And that's just proof that, we never rest on this stuff. We're always seeking new and more in-depth answers. Our second question comes from Andrew Bratt, B-R-A-D-T. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. What are the best places to experience retro WDW today? He's referring to stuff that hasn't changed from the first decade of the Vacation Kingdom. What's left to go visit? Now, we've answered questions like this before, but does anyone have a suggestion on this one?
Sure, I'll go first. So I think the last attraction that probably hasn't been touched or touched the least is the Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse. That is almost, it's been relieved over the course of time, meaning that they put new leaves on it. But other than that, it's still essentially the same walkthrough experience that it was in 1971. So that's my favorite place.
Even the pathways around it really haven't changed.
Yeah. The jungle's kind of, grown up around it, and it doesn't have like the cool tiki torches anymore. But other than that, it's still essentially the same thing it's always been, which is fantastic.
Let me ask you a question. That Tropical Serenade, was that a different show than the Enchanted Tiki Room, or?
No, it was the same show. In the version that ran originally, it was a little bit longer. So they have cut the Offenbach number. You stay off of my bark and I'll stay off of your bark. And they've also cut out the Magic Fountain. And in Let's All Sing Like the Birdies Sing, they have cut out the part where they ask the audience to whistle along. Which is
thankfully.
But that is part of the original 1971 show, and the pre-show is actually still the 1971 pre-show. So that you're right, Brian. That is actually a nice spot.
So that's a good one. And I would also add the Country Bear Jamboree, even though it's been edited down a bit. What remains is an original attraction done by one of the best attraction smiths out there.
Right.
So those are obviously 3 right there. But I also think there's probably some areas that you could get into if they hadn't taken that fountain out in that little courtyard by where First Aid is.
Oh, yeah.
In the Magic Kingdom and all, which they just did. That area, you could always kind of stand in there. It was like a time warp. You're off to the side of the Crystal Palace, and there's little bathrooms there, and the baby care and first aid center. And if you've ever gotten a Band-Aid in there, you're like, man, this must have been what it was like getting a Band-Aid in 1971.
And that reminds me, the bathroom is over in Tomorrowland near the Sun Care Center. Not only there's a sign reminiscent of what was there, but that area of the People Mover tracks, granted not to the original, the People Mover came later, but that area right there has some of the original planters in the original seating and concrete seats. Really brings you back. And the other one I think about too, guys, is the Pinocchio Village House overlooking Small World.
Oh, yes, that's very true.
You know, that's really hasn't changed. So there are a lot of little remnants out there still.
There's one little spot I love over at the Polynesian. So if you're at the resort and you walk past the pool and you're walking down to where the Luau Cove is,
Yes.
there's this little seating area with a banyan tree where you can walk down in there, and it feels like you're a million miles away from everything, and it's really just been kind of left alone.
And that has a name, and I'm going to have to Google it because I don't want to get it wrong and have people yell at me, but I think it's Diamond Beach. And there's swings.
Yes.
So it's a very, very nice area. It's on the far side of the Tuvalu and Fiji longhouses. And on the pathway there. And you can actually walk that full pathway to the Grand Floridian, past the wedding pavilion and over to the Grand Floridian. And it is if you really want to take a walk, like it's a great area. But yeah, so obviously the question is about 71, and that side of it, of the Polynesian House, right, is like a time warp. And also the corrugated wall at the Contemporary. That's
Oh yeah,
I was thinking that.
Absolutely.
and the Ballroom of the
one of
Americas,
them.
where you're going to see RetroMagic. That's hasn't changed much.
No, the monorail platform and all of the resort, all those, I shouldn't say all those resorts, but the monorail platform at the Polynesian, the Contemporary, and the Ticket and Transportation Center really haven't changed either. Other than reversing direction, which you can find on the Tom Nabby episode.
Right.
Yeah.
And adding the Epcot spur eventually.
Correct.
That side of it. But yeah, no. It's there's a lot there. But it is obviously all centered around Seven Seas Lagoon and mostly the Magic Kingdom. So that was a good question. Thank you, Andrew.
Awesome.
And I'm sure people will email us and message us with other suggestions of places we forgot. On from Andrew, we go to Josh Priest. And Josh asked, this is an interesting question, do we think we will ever see the imagination that built these parks rear its head again? Or is it all going to be intellectual property injected stuff all over the parks from here on out? I'll start this answer. We don't generally cover current events, but this is more, I think, of a philosophical question. The official answer, if you go back, the New York Times did an article about 5 years ago, maybe, that kind of charted the future of the company and what they were planning to do with the parks. The short answer is yes, most things will now be tied to an intellectual property. Now, if you read the reasonings that they give behind that, it is largely because it's in response to guest surveys that when they come to a Disney park, or a Disney resort, they want to see elements of Disney characters in everything that they do. And so any ride or experience or attraction or show, they want to see Mickey Mouse or I guess now Marvel or things like that. I think I speak for all four of us that while some of these attractions and shows are really interesting and good on their own, I think we probably all feel like if they were still making non or original intellectual property attractions exclusive to the parks, that they would probably be popular as well.
Yeah, Brian, I think you were exactly right. I think there's some other factors too. For me, I think there's two things, well, maybe three salient points out of the 10,000 things I'm thinking of right now. So one is, if you put yourself in the mindset of where the company was when they started to make these non-IP attractions, this is a point where Walt was calling the shots individually. These were his things. He wanted a pirate ride. He wanted, a haunted house ride or attraction. It wasn't even a ride when he started thinking about it. But this was a gentleman who had gone through, his animation. His interest in animation had started to wane. His interest in live action had started to wane. His interest in creating works for theme parks was red hot. That's what he wanted to do. So he put all of his efforts into making, something for the parks, just like he used to do for movies. So I think really the fact that he was driving it was probably one of the big factor that made these original stories come to life in the parks. Had the parks not existed, he probably would have continued to do this with film, but the parks is what he was really into at that time. So
right.
That's where he went. The studio also had just gotten into live action when Disneyland was opened. I mean, they had only made 2 live action films and a handful of animated films. So they didn't have a huge library of their own intellectual property to pull from for attractions. So, they didn't have a pirate movie to go and use as leverage, and they didn't have like a spooky movie to go and leverage to make an attraction. So they had to do something that was original.
Yeah.
The company today is very, very different. They have, now years and years of their own IP that they can pull from to sort of jumpstart the thoughts on an attraction. And, even in the 1970s and the 1980s, when we were growing up, Disney movies were not super popular. Like 7 people went and saw Tron.
2 of them were you.
Yeah. Like a handful of people saw The Black Hole or, The $1 Million Duck. It's like,
right.
It was a niche interest. And today, Disney movies are super popular. I mean, obviously, like Marvel is huge. It's like, like everything that Disney, like they own the box office now.
Right.
So, certainly if you have the opportunity to, use these stories and characters that people love, well, of course you're going to utilize them. And it's much easier to market to say like, oh, here's a new Frozen attraction because everybody already knows it is, versus like you look back at the marketing for Body Wars and they kind of have to explain what Body Wars is. So it's just easier to use IP. Now I will say this may not last forever. Again, they had times when the movies were very popular and then times when they weren't popular. So we very may well see the pendulum swing in the opposite direction one day. And if they choose to build a 5th park or a brand new park someplace else where they're going to need a lot of attractions and ideas, it's like, then I think we will see original ideas too, because, even in Hong Kong, it's like there are a number of rides that are new, that aren't attached to IP at all. It's like, but it's a really cool story to tell. And in Shanghai as well, it's like, so you have like Mystic Manor and you have I don't remember the name of the one in Shanghai that's like the water thrill ride with like the big crocodile thing at the end of it. So it's like they're still doing it. They just haven't done it here as much. But I think it could happen again.
Your comment about the library is exactly on point, Hal, too. And I was going to add, too, don't forget that, when Walt Disney World was in its infancy, there were attempted IP tie-ins, too, right? Treasure Island. They were going to tie that in with the movie Treasure Island and try to do that. So there were attempts and things to do that. And you're exactly right that the library just wasn't there. Enabled them to do what they do today. I think we also are now in a time where IP, whether it be Disney or any other studio, really it brings in the money. It's the cash, and we are as a society now tied to the familiarity of the stories, of the characters and the plots that we expect and love, and we are involved in those on a daily basis. Just to go and explore something that we're so intimately intertwined with is a big change to society. In the past, you didn't have that exposure. You could easily go and be excited about a raft ride about mutant mushrooms, and you'd think it was fantastic because it didn't apply to anything, right? But that seems corny now, but I'm using that as an example for pirates, right? It didn't need that because you were doing something you couldn't do anywhere else, and you weren't expecting to visit something. Now in our society, we're so ingrained with IP across the board that we're so tied to it that we are expecting to experience it, and we want to experience it.
I just want to eat a cat with Alf on Melmac, so I'm waiting for them to buy
the Alf experience.
Yeah, to buy Alf. That's NBC. Universal should own that. That was an NBC
That's
show.
right.
So when Universal opens up their cat cafe on Melmac, I'm there.
It'll be there.
Let's get the
Great
ADR
question
for that one.
Great question.
This actual next question, I think you had an answer for, Hal, and it was just from Kristen Waterbury asking if we had a recommended reading list anywhere.
And you know what? She's not the only person that has asked that. So I am going to make a point. Hopefully by the time this is out, if not, it'll be shortly afterwards. It's like we'll put that together on the site. So that way you can see that, because we have certainly referenced a number of the same books over and over again here. So let's get a page up, Todd, where people can see the stuff that we like.
Actually, back in November 2017, published a holiday gift guide that not only had some of our artwork on it, but we did have sections of books recommended that were Imagineers, history, official books, and different music. Certainly needs to be expanded. So I think, as you point out, we can take that and make it even better. So that's something we'll look to do.
Fantastic. Our next question comes from a guy with a great name, Brian Place, and he asks, what are the names of the islands inside World Showcase Lagoon? Those are the islands out there as they blow up Illuminations, soon to be RIP. And you see those islands out there with the trees and all on them. JT, I think you have the answer for this one.
I do. All right. So if you're sitting in front of American Adventure and facing Spaceship Earth, looking right from America, there's 2 islands on the left and 1 on the right. In order from left to right, they are named. Here we go. Official names. Island 1, Island 2, and Island 3.
That's amazing. That's the same combination as my luggage.
Yeah, right there in order, left to right. They didn't go right to
I
left.
have to put my hand up.
Yes.
But there is another island, though, the one that connects the bridge between France and England. Or I'm sorry, between the United Kingdom and France. That's an island now. So does that have a name?
Is
it islands?
I don't
is it
know.
Island 0?
Is it an
Sure,
island
I don't know.
or is
I
it
don't know that
an
one.
archipelago?
Well, it depends if you treat the bridges as land masses, I suppose. But it technically is an island.
Now, I heard someone say that that's supposed to represent the Straits of Gibraltar, which sounds like a load of crap to me. But, I mean, it is between England and France, so I guess it makes sense, you know?
Straits of Gibraltar between Spain and you mean the English Channel.
Oh, no, I read something that said the Straits of Gibraltar, so you're right. That is crap. That's crap.
I mean, between France and
wrote
Morocco, yes, right? Because it's but well, no, that doesn't make sense. It would have to be between Spain and Morocco. So no, absolutely not. It's got to be false.
All right.
Well, I can't wait to visit them. Island 1, 2, and 3. You know, we want that experience.
Yeah, Epcot forever. You're going to be able to get to float out there on a drone and everything. Just wait.
All right. Here's another current events question from the Hung Throttle podcast. That's an actual Twitter account. Asked us, will Galaxy's Edge become an instant park classic?
Number one, I don't think anything is an instant classic. Like that's just crazy to me. That classic means something totally different, in my opinion. I've been randomly venting to you guys throughout the past couple months with this, and my biggest hang up with Galaxy's Edge, which I think it's going to be good. I think it'll be cool. I haven't seen it yet in either park. I think that, to me personally, I think Disney is banking too much on the new stuff. They didn't go back old enough for me, for anybody. I mean, I would like to walk through a Star Wars land and see Hoth and see Darth Vader and see Luke or, whatever, something related to that. And go even farther that, I'm not that old, but, my 4-year-old daughter, we're watching walkthroughs, and she said every time, is Darth Vader around there? Where is he? I want to see him. And I'm like, I'm sorry, he's not there, and you never will see him there. And I think that's going to take a little bit of the steam and the thunder out of the whole thing. It's still going to be cool. I think it'll be neat to go eat some fancy popcorn and fly the Millennium Falcon and maybe see Kylo Ren yelling at me or something. But, Darth Vader's not there.
So, yeah, I don't know about instant classic. I think eventually over time that place will probably change as the movies evolve. I think the reason that they went with a place like that, this is just my own opinion, and maybe others have the same. I think Disney tried to play it safe. If they had created a Hoth or a Tatooine or something else that we are intimately familiar with, the amount of you got it wrong, or this isn't right, or these things don't add up, or you never would have had this next to that.
Totally agree.
That goes out the window when you move to Batu, or however we say it. So I think that gives them an excuse to create a world that you've never been to before. Pandora, when they created that, they had to kind of mimic something. Classic, it's tough to say. I mean, classic attraction, in the word classic really harkens back to days of something of really old, has been around a while, you really got to use it. So I think that's something that has to be determined over time, and what its staying power is. If we're talking about this 15 years from now, they're still there, I would give the nod to Star Tours as a classic attraction before I would to these.
Yeah, my answer is no. No, it won't become an instant park classic.
Next question. Sounds like Mike Ditka. No, next question.
And for me, I think we have to wait until Rise of the Resistance opens before we can really do any final judgment, because the little bits and pieces that we've seen leaked from that, to me, are not the Millennium Falcon isn't compelling, but the pieces of video that we've seen so far of that is very compelling. So
game changing.
So let's see what happens once that opens up, and there's lots of neat stuff to see.
All right. Thank you, gents. Our friend Michael Knox, who is coming to Retro Magic in October and says he'll see us then, asked, there's another kind of current events, but also 2 questions, actually. One, if we were in charge of Disney parks, what attraction would you consider putting in refurbishment? My answer is imagination.
Ditto.
Yeah, 100%.
Come on, JT.
I'm going to say Living Seas.
Nice. I was actually, I was hoping somebody would drop Carousel of Progress in there too.
To me, I think the seas are cool enough without Nemo, and I mean, you could make it really, really neat, like just pull all that garbage out of there. And I like Nemo.
We know definitively for 25 years they were cooler without Nemo. So
yeah,
right.
They were really cool.
It's just been ruined, and like you guys said, imagination is just.
It just needs. I'd love to see it get some attention.
I was going to say, I think that's a good call about Carousel of Progress. Obviously, the last act has fallen behind the times, as it has before. So it's time to revisit that, and allegedly that's in the works. Yeah. So maybe we'll see that shortly. Let's see what else is.
Yeah, I think Nemo right now falls in the category. It's fine. We'll get through with it.
Touch up the blue, keep it running.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what else? I mean, people could say that, take Pirates and turn it into more like Shanghai, and there can be arguments for that. Personally, another one on my list, and I might get shot for this, but Space Mountain. How you and I went on Space Mountain Disneyland back in May together, and you and I had a discussion about, what could you do with the track and how the track was relayed. I think it's an interesting experience. I think it's, jolt and back jarring bumps and stuff have seen its time. I think it's an awesome space to do something really, really cool, such as propulsion, maglev propulsion into it, much like a rock and roller coaster, something like that, that could really, bring it into the current times and make it a stellar attraction, pun intended.
Yeah, that it is. It's reached end of life, so it's time to do something else.
And with Tron going in next door, it's a tough call to say whether or not that's going to even be around for a while. I mean,
supposedly
something has to be done.
It was supposed to be retracked, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago when they put it off. So, I mean, it's just, the tracks are literally aged out to the point where they need to be replaced.
Right.
So something's got to happen with it at some point.
You and I talked about if you wanted to add Star Wars to the Magic Kingdom, a true overlay, going through a warp tunnel, showing like you're going warp speed as you're accelerating up to 70 miles an hour and then shooting straight up into space would be quite a thing.
Well, I guess, and you bring me to it, like, if there's one thing that probably should be rehabbed, it's probably literally all of Tomorrowland, like,
yes,
to some extent.
Which, we're going to see what we're going to get out of that.
Because it's just all over the place, and whether that means it's not Tomorrowland anymore and it becomes something else that it can hang a theme on, that's fine. If they want to do a true Tomorrowland, that's cool too. But we definitely have like this strange hodgepodge of, Buzz Lightyear and cars and Space Mountain and like a shooting ride and Laugh Floor, and it's become miscellaneous land.
It really is. It's become sci-fi land, and I think that's really where a lot of it goes to, which is fine. That's part of a fantasy, and we could certainly have that. The word tomorrow doesn't.
I wouldn't mind, if they just went straight up science fiction on
totally
that.
Works.
No problem.
Discovery Land is kind of like that in Paris. I mean, let's admit it, that land in all parks has an identity crisis, no matter where you are, is struggling. I mean, how you and I saw First Land, and Brian too, we were walking through Disneyland, and Tomorrowland out there is a hodgepodge of a sad state. Dilapidated rides, unused buildings. It's bad. So
Michael also asked if we wish to see more of a presence of Roger Rabbit at MGM Studios. And me personally, going to MGM, that's like, MGM is the Epcot of you guys for me. MGM, I remember going as a kid. It's my earliest memories there. He was there a lot at the time. I mean, he was very present. There was little gags, little things, little pieces, parts, the Dipmobile, everything was there. Honestly, it goes back to that IP question. I mean, you can inject him, but nobody's going to know who he is. I mean, a few people will, but not enough to me to put the money into it, I think. That's my opinion. But I'd love to see it personally, but I don't know if, once again, everybody else would.
And I think that at this point there's a fear for Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin in Disneyland, right? Isn't there thoughts that it's going to be taken out? There was an announcement of an attraction coming, which escapes me at the moment.
Oh, it was the train, the railway ride, the Mickey.
Oh, that's right. Minnie and Mickey's Runaway Railway, which they're putting in the Hollywood studios right now. And so the thought is that because they announced it was going in Toontown in Disneyland, that it's going to take Roger Rabbit's place. And the Roger Rabbit ride there is very neat. It's a dark ride, but the hook there is that you can turn your car 360 degrees, hence the name Cartoon Spin, as you go through the ride. And obviously, most of those rides are made for you to look primarily in the direction and to the sides of where you're going, and not necessarily behind you and all. So that Roger Rabbit dark ride is very much a fully immersive 360 ride as you go through it, and it's really well done. And there were a couple of Roger Rabbit attractions that were part of what was going to eventually be slated for Sunset Boulevard, I think,
that is
at Hollywood Studios.
That the trolley, I believe, which got morphed into the trolley that you see at Disney DCA. There were a couple other things. I think the Roger Rabbit IP just doesn't have the staying power. It is a more grown-up film. It doesn't resonate as well now as it did back then. And even then, it was kind of an oddball piece of production. The characters didn't fit into the normal Disney motif, if you will. So
is this where we lose fans when I say I didn't care for it?
You can say it. I said it about Horizons.
I enjoyed the movie, but outside of that, I found him very annoying. And it just, yes, it was meant to be in the 1920s and 30s, and it fits into that bill, but I just never saw it fitting in. So they
really rammed him down your throat too. Whether you liked him,
did.
I mean, you'd see him in little shorts beforehand. The merch was big as a kid. I mean, he was ever present in my young Disney brain. He was just all over. And then at the same time, though, there was a weird licensing where he was kind of Disney but kind of not, and you hear about that stuff and you're like, well, yeah, no wonder he didn't make it. It's almost like the Spider-Man thing happening now with Marvel. It's a weird argument.
Yeah, apparently it's like Spielberg has to agree because it was a co-production, and then there's so here'll be my take on it. In one line of thought, it could be cool if each park had a mascot. So, Mickey's for the Magic Kingdom, Figment, whether there's a good ride or not, is sort of like the character mascot for Epcot. Like maybe Roger Rabbit could be, the character mascot for Disney's Hollywood Studios, whether or not anybody knows who he is, because like the association with Figment now compared to the original ride in 82 at Epcot, it's pretty much dead and buried, but somehow he magically shows up on like every single piece of merchandise for like food and wine and everything else. And so I don't know, maybe if they could work out the licensing things, that could be his function. And for Animal Kingdom, it could be like Joe Rohde's earring could be like the character that
it comes to life like that Microsoft paperclip that used to be
Mr.
in
DNA.
Microsoft office. Clippy, let me just help you. Oh, you're Mr. DNA.
Looks like you're trying to build a theme park.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
That was Michael, and he says we'll see you in October. So that's awesome.
Michael, good to see you.
Todd,
what else we got?
I'm bringing my Roger Rabbit stuffed animal with me.
Put him on your shoulder like a banshee.
I got a little suction cup one that used to go in the car window from that era.
Todd, why don't you take this next one?
Sure. So Justin Margadona asked, I heard that the gas crisis in the 1970s put a delay or stoppage to other phases of the property. Do we know what those other phases of construction would have been? So the ones that immediately come to mind for probably myself as well as the most of our listeners out there are the 4 hotels, the Venetian, the Asian, the Persian, and the Mediterranean that would have been on the monorail loop. Those are probably the most prominent in a lot of our memories, as well as Western River expansion, which would have been a huge expansion where the pad where Splash Mountain and Thunder Mountain is. It would have housed 2 attractions. And that's certainly probably an entire show in the details. How you've got some more information on some of the other areas that would have been expanded upon as well.
Oh yeah, they were thinking about a whole bunch of things. They were going to do like a full-blown version of, as you mentioned earlier, Treasure Island. Going to do like more attractions on Treasure Island. They had talked about doing a bunch of attractions at Fort Wilderness, and even more thing called Buffalo Junction that had like more places to stay there. They had toyed around with doing almost like a SeaWorld style attraction as a side attraction with dolphin shows and things. So they had thought about any number of different ways to expand Walt Disney World, and unfortunately, when that gas crunch severely reduced the amount of visitors, it's like they just didn't have the income coming in and to justify any of that stuff.
Yeah, really hit. And we're lucky we're talking about Space Mountain aging. We're lucky we got that. I think it's something to the fact they had already started that, so they just continued it, right?
Yeah. They said they had already spent the money to get the concrete and start to pour the concrete for that. So they decided to just keep it going. Otherwise, like a lot of that, they would have shut that down, and perhaps some of the other Tomorrowland things too. In fact, that's probably the reason why we lost the train station in Tomorrowland, is because they just didn't want to spend the money on like doing that. So that's a tiny little thing that was cut out.
Can you imagine if that big circular concrete pad was just left? That's where Cirque du Soleil would have been today.
Just a giant spinner and some giant spinner ride.
Well, thanks for that question, Joe.
Yeah, it's interesting. We always love to talk about things that weren't built. Joe Barlow, we have a number of questions from our friend Joe Barlow, who has been marathon listening to our back catalog and emailing us some of the most interesting questions where stuff we talked about we forgot and we have to go back and listen to. He starts off here with, we can all answer this one. Over at Fort Wilderness near Roy's cabin, there was a tree with a lawnmower stuck in it. Was this faked or something they just happened to find? The answer is it was not faked. It was absolutely something that they happened to find when they were developing the property. It was a lawnmower from the 30s or 40s. It was a push mower. It wasn't like a lawn boy or something. It was a manual push
which if you have a small yard, is the best way because it is true scissor action on your.
We had that we had a little postcard sized backyard in our row home in the Roxborough neighborhood of Philadelphia growing up, and that's how we cut the lawn. We had a little push thing. They you push them and it makes the blades spin around, but there's no motors or anything. And so one of these was left against a tree at some point, probably because it broke. And over the years, the tree, as a tree is wont to do, will grow up around, and it consumed a large part of it. Now, the interesting thing is they took it out 7-8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. But the excuse at the time was that the stump, because it was really just down to a stump. I mean, it was a stump and it was bare.
Right.
There are plenty of pictures online if you want to Google it. But they said that they took it out because the stump was starting to rot, and it was like a hazard to guests. And if you ever saw the thing, there is no possible scenario where that thing was a hazard to guests. I mean, it was just they just apparently at some point just took it out.
Yeah, it was. I recall when it was actually still a tree, like it was big fault, and then it slowly got lower and lower. But in it, to me, it seemed like less and less of the mower was visible. Mm-hmm. By the end, you could see just a small smidgen of metal, and the sign was there. And it was a really cool sign. Just that old Fort Wilderness look. But
so it's interesting. Trees taking over things. We were at Arlington National Cemetery back in July, taking the tour, and some of the trees are doing the same thing to the headstones there, which is really interesting.
Thank you, Joe, for that. We'll come back to you with more of your questions. Doug Skinner was our next folk who came in and said, if you could go back and experience any ride, attraction, or show at Walt Disney World as if it were your very first time all over again, which would you choose?
I'll jump in here first. And, I'm not going to say something in the Magic Kingdom which will probably freak people out, but there are 2 attractions, and Horizons is not one of them. And I would have a hard time choosing between Spaceship Earth, Walter Cronkite, and World of Motion.
Well, my answer is Spaceship Earth, Walter Cronkite. So
yeah, there we go. So we'll get 2. So I'll just by default of that, because I just love the ending and at the apex of the sphere. But World of Motion was, as we've talked about before, on the level of Spaceship Earth and on the level of Horizons, but it's one that hasn't gotten the billing, and I certainly love that attraction so much and really miss that one. Horizons has been documented to death. We've talked about it to death, and we certainly dedicated 2 complete episodes to World of Motion as well, but I just don't think it has the nod and the appreciation that's out there, and to see it again would be something cool.
The first time, honestly, some of my first time ones are, I don't necessarily remember them. I would like certain ones to actually go on, like we talked about Horizons. I would like to go on that actually for a first time. I'd like to go on World of Motion. Some of those old Epcot ones definitely would be at the top of my list. I always go back to this one in my brain. Imagine we used to stay at Fort Wilderness, and you'd look kind of out that way as you'd be on the boat to the Contemporary, and I always remember seeing Space Mountain and thinking, like, what is that? Didn't know what that was. And you couldn't ride it because you weren't big enough. That was just it. And then finally that moment, when you finally got tall enough to ride it, that was definitely like a big moment. And, that feeling of being tall enough again is quite a good one as a kid. So I'd say, that would be a fun memory to relive for sure.
I am going to interpret this question as meaning if I could go back and experience an attraction that is currently there today as if it was my first time.
Okay.
What one would it be? Which is really tough. As I get into my 80s, this could actually be a real thing that happens. I could get dementia and completely forget that I ever
every trip is your first time.
Right. I'm like, oh, this is so exciting.
Look
at this.
51st.
Yes. I'm going to have to go with the Tiki Room just because the way that starts small and just slowly expands and slowly expands and slowly expands, and this room comes to life. It's just such a great, interestingly paced show, and the great introduction to audio animatronics and the color. I'm gonna have to go with that one.
I'll also say, in that vein, I mean, I think Spaceship Earth, because I think it may have been my first attraction. I mean, the memory is hazy. It certainly was my first Epcot attraction, and it stuck with me more than any of the others, although they all stuck with me. But I would also say I was extremely excited for my first ride on, and it did not disappoint, and that is Soarin', which I love. And the original Soarin', knowing kind of what it was, and the lines were like 72 hours long, and you got on the ride, and it lived up to the billing. It just... So if I could go back to 2005 or 6, whatever trip it was, the first time I rode it at Epcot, that would absolutely fall under a more recent example for that question.
We could take you to California and hit you on the head with something and give you amnesia, and we could go do it next week. You could go ride.
I think I'd be more excited to ride Small World for the first time in that scenario. So back to our friend Joe Barlow. Joe, this is not his last question, by the way, asks us about the small boat launches that are used between Fort Wilderness and the Contemporary and some of the other Magic Kingdom resorts. They are by far my favorite transportation on property. The openness of the boats and how low they sit in the water really gives it a personal feel when you're on the lake. Do you know who manufactured them? And have the boats been updated over the years, or are these the original ones? I'm going to start the answer, but Howard has a critical piece that he has to add in here that I didn't know. These boats are original, operating from opening day, October 1st, 1971, as resort transportation. And to give you a little background on their operation, they started as steam launches, but were prone to mechanical problems, as so many of the early boats at Magic Kingdom were when it opened. They were converted to gasoline engines until the oil embargo of 1974, and then converted to natural gas along with the ferries. Later, they were outfitted with Detroit diesels and now have Perkins diesels engines. And these are the really attractive boats with the blue and white canopies over the tops of them that runs between the Polynesian Contemporary, Grand Floridian, Fort Wilderness, and Wilderness Lodge.
Often billed as resort launches.
Yeah, their official name is the Motor Launch, not to be confused with the slightly larger boats that are called the motor cruisers. And they're the ones that look like the Friendships that are used in, and they tend to run those to, I think, the Fort more than they do to the others during higher traffic times. But so they're there. We love riding on them. And Howard knows who built them, right?
Yes, as it turns out, most of the watercraft at Walt Disney World, prior to the opening of Central Shops, they had to have somebody else build the stuff for them. So the Jungle Cruise boats, the Small World boats, all of these, as well as these motor launches, were built by a company called Morgan Yacht, which is actually located in my hometown right now, St. Petersburg, Florida. So they were made here and shipped over there. That company has since changed hands once, but the next time Brian comes down, we're going to drive over there and see if we can't talk our way onto the lot and see if we can't find some sort of vestiges of the boats still around there.
So just for a little more background, Joe, and also because this is a topic that we love, there are 6 of them. They are named the Adventurer, the Explorer, the Mariner, the Navigator, the Seafarer, and Voyager, and they can hold 39 passengers. Obviously, they're much smaller than the ferries, but a little known fact is the mast that comes up through these things so there's a little bit of a smokestack that comes up from the center of them that also they've festooned to look like a mast. Atop of that is a lightning rod, since obviously running a boat on the giant body of water in Florida where lightning and thunder are prone to happen. They have a lightning rod on them, and all the boats actually that they run out there have lightning rods on them for that express purpose. So he asked if the boats also had been updated over the years, or are these the original ones? I think they're the original ones.
Another interesting fact about the boats today, there are one of the few remaining the only remaining transportation method that still adorns the triangular color-coded flags, which were actually something that flew on the buses as well as the boats. So if you look carefully, you will see.
And now they fly on Brazilian tour boats.
There you go. So not only those, but all the boats within the Seven Seas Laguna Bay Lake have specific color flags, which tells you the route. But you sadly won't see those colors posted anymore, but they are kind of a little throwback to ways of identifying your boat from afar years ago.
Outstanding. So I hope that answered your questions there, Joe, and piqued the interest of some of our listeners. George Whittenberg has asked us, hey guys, you've done a lot of... Yes, putting emphasis on the H. You've done a lot of shows on attractions and hotels, which are great. But we leave out details of what cast members wore at those various attractions and hotels. So he would like to know, what did the ride operators wear at Horizons, Spaceship Earth, and Space Mountain, or maybe other attractions, on day one of those attractions? I think, didn't the Horizons people wear some kind of jumpsuit?
Yeah, I think the real easy answer to this is polyester.
Well, that much is certain.
That much is certain.
Which must have been very comfortable in the Florida heat.
Absolutely. It wasn't itchy at all.
So the old joke was Epcot stood for experimental polyester clothes of tomorrow amongst the cast members. Yeah, there's actually photos of these outfits that are out there, and I think we have some of them in our galleries.
We do in our galleries.
Yeah, we can certainly show you some of those and get those posted up. And they were stylishly late 70s, early 80s with stripes and all sorts of wide collars.
If you watch, we've mentioned Black Hole once in this, though, or if you watch Star Trek The Motion Picture from 1979, both of those would give you a good sense of what a lot of Epcot opening attraction costumes looked like. If you see what the people were wearing in those things, it was very much a late 70s, early 80s space vibe on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting they were color coded to match the attractions. Yeah. So
yes,
as part of the color system that the attractions had, it's like the clothes were part of that. They matched. So it's really, really well thought out.
Yeah, so Spaceship Earth, since it's a giant golf ball, everybody was dressed in golf shirts and loud pants. And it's Bob Hope. They were dressed like Bob Hope.
Right. Yeah, they had spikes.
There's people throwing bananas at their radio right now listening to us. Hey, we've got one more question. Our last question from Joe Barlow. Mm-hmm. Joe says he is looking forward to the new show and has a question that in Epcot Center, are there many people that have trouble understanding which direction Communicore East and Communicore West are, or is it just how? And then he adds a note, remember, West smells like sewage.
Well, I think pretty soon we're not going to have to worry about which is which, unfortunately.
But the answer is yes.
There are definitely a lot.
A lot of us forget which is which, and a lot of us don't care. So it's just that one or that one.
I think now, obviously, there was the east-west delineation was lost, many years ago. So I think it doesn't matter as much. But how you always get mixed up because you as the Magic Kingdom, you're walking into the north, and in Disneyland you're walking into the north, and in Epcot you're walking in directly to the south. So it certainly throws you off and flip-flops.
We were just today. It's like for a while they were doing this thing with the maps where the maps were actually oriented to their proper direction of the parks. Oh. So like if you walked into Epcot, the maps were upside down. For the longest time, it's like the maps were done from wherever you walked in was kind of like how the map was oriented. So, the Epcot map had Future World first and then World Showcase in the back.
That's right.
And then at some point in the 2000s, it flipped.
Yes.
Upside down. And all of them did that. So like suddenly, when you opened up the map, World Showcase was at the bottom and Future World was at the top, and MGM suddenly did this like whole turnaround shift where it ran on a diagonal.
Yep.
And the entrance was in the upper or upper right hand corner or something, and it's just they actually today with the new map that came out for Galaxy's Edge, they actually put it back to the way that it was, so that the park entrance is on the bottom, and it sort of follows the way that you naturally walk in.
Interesting.
So I'm curious now whether they will do that with the Epcot map and return it back to its not GPS accurate, but like more of a mental model way of doing it.
Not to be used for navigation.
Yeah, and my feeling was, I think at some point somebody said like, oh, well, someone's got a nav thing on their phone, so they're going to want to look at this and have it match the map so they can figure out where they are in relation to the nav on their phone.
Sure.
But with today, the phones actually, there's apps from Disney that have the map on it. So if you're going to that have GPS capabilities. So if you're going to use the app to do that navigation, then great. It's all right there on your phone. And for people that don't have, don't choose to navigate that way, it's like they can go back to the mental model and use the map like a normal person.
Yep.
Okay. One more on my list here before we move to a different list. Huxplorer asks, what's the deal with Orange Bird? I went to the parks a lot from 1987 to 1997, and I have no memory of this character, but I see their merchandise everywhere.
And that is some incredibly fortuitous timing.
Isn't it, though? It's like when I saw his question, I'm like, wow, you just missed it.
Yeah. So the Orange Bird was a character developed for the Florida Orange Growers Association as part of their sponsorship for the Enchanted Tiki Room. So he kind of debuted in the 1970s, as a walk-around character. He had a bunch of merchandise. If you walked into any Florida Orange Grove type stand, it's like there was cards and beach balls and inflatables and banks and all this stuff. Like, he really represented, Florida citrus. He was in a series of commercials with Anita Bryant. There was a meet and greet character in Adventureland. He was huge. And he continued and persisted until 1986, 1 year before he started coming. And then he just disappeared off the face of the earth after the sponsorship with the Florida Orange Growers evaporated. So suddenly there is no Orange Bird because he's just dead and buried. In the 90s, you could actually still find leftovers of the merchandise in sort of the roadside grove stands. So I would go find like a batch of 6 yo-yos or something and buy them, or some jewelry, or there was still stuff was still hanging around kind of on the clearance rack. But he had essentially really kind of disappeared from public consciousness. And then in the early 2000s? Hang on.
Yeah, around then. I mean, it was the mid-2000s, I think. The Japanese parks, right? Yeah.
Right. All of a sudden, he started showing up in merchandise in Tokyo Disneyland. I actually ordered some stuff on eBay from Tokyo because it was so rare. Because you would find like the same 3 Orange Bird items on eBay over and over again if you're looking for anything Orange Bird. You'd find like the bang and a couple of little PVC things. But they made these really beautiful little PVC figurines for over there. Supposedly, there was a holiday there is a holiday in Japan called Orange Day, which is on April 14th. So somebody at Disney, and it would actually be, we need to find out who this person was that actually brought this back. I think we need to do some research and find out who they are. They figured like, oh, well, we have this Orange Bird character. It's like, let's make that part of Orange Day. And he got huge over there. There was all kinds of merchandise. And then eventually I guess it ended up spilling over into America because, people were buying this stuff from Japan and showing it off online and like, hey, look at this cool Orange Bird thing I found. And finally, they actually brought him back in the parks. So in, I think it was 2012, let me double check that. Yep. 2012, someone actually found in the sculpture studio of WDI in California, they actually found the original Orange Bird figure that hung in the Sunshine Tree at the Juice Bar in the Sunshine Tree Terrace, and they refurbished him and brought him back to Florida, painted him up, and put him back in the Sunshine Tree and came out with a line of merchandise to go with it, and kind of officially reintroduced him to the parks. And from them, he's just kind of spread. And for me, I think it's really cool because there are so few things with the Magic Kingdom in Orlando that are, original or done just for the park, our park. It's like most of the stuff is, it's from Disneyland, and you got the crappy version of it. But this is a character that was done for us. So I think it's really cool that he has now come back around, to represent the park, and he's ours. So I love that. And that's why he's everywhere now.
Excellent. Yeah, I was excited when I saw that question come in as well. So most of those questions were submitted via either email or Twitter. But we're going to jump over to our Instagram feed where we solicited some questions, and they did not disappoint. We got some good ones there too. Our first question from K Hollywood 9 asked that Buzz Price said they built Epcot Center in the worst possible spot. Is this why they tore Horizons down, and is this why they are tearing down Communicore West?
Well, I know for a fact the spot maybe wasn't ideal. Remember, the spot where Epcot is today is not the spot where it was originally going to be in overall.
I agree, Todd. I've heard that too, where the people that decided where to build Epcot didn't refer to the original planners of Disney World, and if you ask the original people, they said that was one of the worst spots to build. It was full of roots and swamp and whatever have you.
And then on top of it, when they did select the site, then they had to move it over about 300 yards due to an endangered woodpecker. And that's why I believe that one of the roads there is something Woodpecker Lane or something like that, and paying respect. And ironically, the bird left, and after they moved after the park was built.
I don't think they had to move the park. I think they just had to move the parking lot.
Was it just the parking lot?
Originally, the parking lot was going to be on the side of Epcot.
Gotcha.
And they had to move it to the front.
Gotcha. I thought some of it had to be shifted over too. But, I mean, look, it's Florida soil. There's a lot of sandy stuff. There's been rumors about that Horizons was sinking, as we've talked about. Horizons was in really not great shape in the end. The Odyssey area was definitely supposedly a sinkhole and all that. And honestly, I think the Communicore, West, I had to think about there. Which one? Yeah, it's West. I mean, it's just past its prime, and I think that's also.
And we know the reason there's the large bridge between Future World and World Showcase is because they couldn't build on that land.
Couldn't build anything that's all soggy, so turned it into water space. So, but I think that pretty much sums it up.
But that's probably not why they're tearing down Communicore West.
No, I don't believe so.
So thank you.
It's actually the curse of the Indian burial mound. That's
Vincent Price left the idol there. Well, hey, Disney Girl 71 asked our thoughts on all the recently revealed changes coming to Epcot. I'll answer this one first. They didn't really reveal a lot. There are a lot of changes coming, and I will say this. This is my answer to everyone. I don't know what they're doing, and neither do the rest of us, because those plans that they announced were not particularly detailed for the most part. I'm glad to see them adding attractions into World Showcase. I am glad to, after 10 years of Animal Kingdom, Magic Kingdom, and Disney MGM Studios all getting multi-billion-dollar injections of development and updates, that it's finally Epcot's turn. So beyond that, I don't have an opinion, except Epcot in the state that it's in requires more and investment, and they're doing that. And I will reserve my judgment on whether I like it or not, but I do think it's a good idea.
I agree definitely with you, Brian. It is time. It's ready to be worked on. I saw a lot of people picking apart the, hey, you get World Showcase, and I forget the 3 other worlds they changed it
World
into.
Nature, World Discovery, and World Celebration.
Which is really interesting because Epcot really did have 4 areas. They told you it was Future World, and they told you it was World Showcase. There was 2 areas. We've talked about this multiple times. The area of Future World East was hard landscaped and was about discovery. So that makes sense. It is still that way today. That's the way it was when it was the beginning. What is going to be World Nature? was seas and land and imagination, soft science, and totally makes sense. And I get the reason for pulling the celebration portion of it in. It's I think a little bit about going back to Epcot's roots, a little of the celebration. It's also to hopefully relieve some of the crowds around World Showcase as well. So I have no issue with that rebranding. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that it's going to be challenging. It's going to be a challenging task for them. I think the one thing we have to remember as fans, you're not going to get the Epcot of old. You're going to have inklings of it. You're going to have some of those feelings come back. But you're not going to see the big type attractions that you had in the past. I think our only hope for that is what they do with Spaceship Earth and possibly a reimagination of Imagination, which would be great. But I'm not afraid of the IP. It's time to move on. But I think they can do some things that pay some respect to the old stuff as well.
I don't think anybody else has anything to add to that. So we'll move on to a question from the one and only Mr. K. And he wants to know, when was swimming in Seven Seas Lagoon officially prohibited? And this answer blows a lot of people's minds. The answer is 2001.
Wow. That's I was in my head, I was thinking like 99 for some reason around River Country.
I mean, the areas became small. Well, River Country's 2001. It also stopped. But so they kept enclosing in more and more the swimming area because of the rental boats and other things that were out there, and because it was used less. I mean, we've talked about this once or twice before. I think the preferences of resort guests was they preferred the pools, especially as the pools got more elaborate, and that was the era where they were building things like Stormalong Bay and at the Yacht and Beach Club and things like that, and you just, people wanted to go on cool water slides and things like that, and not so much swim in the lagoon, which was becoming darker and darker as the years went on, and nature reclaimed a lot of what was originally a crystal clear thing. But yeah, believe it or not, the last of the swimming was in 2001, which,
crazy,
to us doesn't seem that long ago, and to some of our listeners is before they were born. So,
The what's interesting though too is up until a year ago you could still water ski out there, which Matt, I never did, but you could go out with Sammy Duval off which according to the lore of the amoeba, you weren't churning up the soil underneath when you dipped in out in the 50-foot water. So but yeah, you could still swim up until a year ago.
That's
too.
True.
Sammy Duval.
Our friend Jeff, I think it's Jeff at Tomorrow Society. We've been on his podcast, right? Yeah, I know I've done it. He asked, which lesser-known Imagineers played a key role in the development of Walt Disney World and deserve a lot more attention? And we are not going to answer this question, Jeff. I'm going to tell you 2 reasons why. First, that's a great topic for a future episode. And second, we all know Tom K. Morris is working on a magnum opus specifically to address that question. We know he's working on a book to cover so many forgotten people who contributed to the parks and to Walt Disney Imagineering. So let's wait until his book comes out eventually and tackle that one then. This next one is also a short answer from C. Kundari. She asks, why did they ever change the original Journey into Imagination? And the answer is because they're stupid.
Moving on.
Next question.
But I'll give you the nickel answer is it was timing. It was a victim of timing. A 15-year-old ride, especially in the late 1990s, was just an old ride. It was a dated ride. A 25-year-old ride or 30-year-old ride at that point became a classic that maybe needed a couple of things to spruce it up. And unfortunately, when they looked at Journey to Imagination, they just thought it was very much a relic of 1983 and that they should move on and redo it and make it hip and take Figment out of it and start anew. And it was a terrible decision. So that's my answer.
More on that in a future podcast.
Yeah. That's the one biggie we haven't done yet.
That's another biggie
Journey
for 2020.
Into Imagination, yes.
2020.
Somebody asked us what we think of the new attraction posters. I like them. The Epcot ones they showed. Yeah, looks great. Somebody else asked about the Epcot transformation. What would you guys do with the Imagination Pavilion if you were in charge?
Let's say a bulldozer.
Well, I mean, again, they're moving away. That's the way that's drawn. It's in the World Celebration Village, not the World Nature, since it's they had to put it somewhere. But I have always believed that the natural course for that particular pavilion would be for one of the technology companies. Apple would have been a natural partner for that because they were known for forward-thinking products. But really, one of the big tech companies, somebody out there, somebody who's not a crazy person, doing, I think Elon Musk flying his car up into space and stuff. But somebody doing that kind of work, working with the company to do a new Imagination Pavilion would be, well, obviously with Figment involved, would be really cool as far as I'm concerned. But it also occurred to me, since this answers both questions, Epcot Transformation and Imagination Pavilion is, I mean, understand, until the last 10 years of these big refurbs, all that stuff was driven by who the corporate sponsors were, who the partners were going to be. Like, Disney couldn't do that or didn't want to do that stuff on their own. And now everything they're building is stuff that they're just laying the cash out themselves. Every one of those $14 tickets you go to sit in a chair and watch the Captain Marvel for the 14th time in the theater, you're helping pay for that stuff. And so that kind of drives a difference in, I think, some of the content we get. And the thought process I had is, when there was a corporate element, when there were outside people whose whims and whimsies had to be considered in addition to whatever Disney and their people were trying to do, I venture to say I think we got a better product than we get now with just the internal stuff involved.
Yeah, I think, too, with me, I'd like to see the Runaway Railway and what that technology has to offer and where they're going with it. And then I think that would be cool if they could integrate whatever they're teasing with that whole thing. The projections, the 3Ds without glasses, whatever it's going to be. I think that'd be a cool way to up the ante in Imagination.
I would agree with that. Well, gents, I don't have any more questions on my various lists. Do you have any questions?
I do not, but I have some future answers. How's that?
Oh, I like that.
So, I hinted to Journey into Imagination, possibly on 2020. I also kind of want to tag 2020 as thanks to how the year of video and film that is coming up. I think it's something that we haven't talked about in a long time.
You opening up a video store, Todd?
Yeah. Here's the concept. You can come in and there'll be these cassettes that have movies on them inside. Yeah, and you can rent them and take them home play them in your house.
But you can't pick them up. They have to be behind the shelf. Somebody could steal them, right? So you're just going to have
Well, what we do is we put the cases out. Oh. So, yeah, then you bring the case to the counter. Then I put the cassette inside.
Do you have to rewind the movie before you return it?
Only if you're kind.
Yeah, then you would rewind. What I would probably have to do is, if you don't rewind it for a nominal fee, I would rewind it for you,
like a quarter,
as to not,
like a quarter.
Yeah, as to not inconvenience the next person who's going to rent the.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember when you used to see that you could rent the actual VCR?
Yes.
My parents did that for Indiana Jones when it first came out. They rented Indiana Jones the movie and the VCR so we could watch it at home.
What a night!
I mean, yeah, because VCRs until the late '80s, I mean, they were a major investment. JT, like your parents were dropping $1,000 or $1,500.
My parents still have theirs, and it still works.
I have one at the top of the. I have one at the top of the closet here that I can dust off when necessary. But I wonder if that, of all the little hipster trends of things that have come back that we never thought would come back, like typewriters and things, like they just like, oh, isn't this quaint?
Oh, and LPs.
Yeah, I mean the records I get because you lose music. As much as it is a sensory experience, for us growing up, it was a tactile experience too. Holding the record, holding the album, the visual experience of the covers and all. I get the vinyl thing. I mean, I totally get it. Also because I hate paying for digital media. I despise paying for something that I don't own and can't hold in my hand. I don't want something that some rights lawyer someday 20 years from now can take away from me when Apple goes out of business or something. And it's like, oh, you don't have your music anymore. I love owning physical media, DVDs, movies, all that stuff. But that I get.
Speaking of physical media,
Yeah.
Todd and How.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're back here to the video store.
All right, so what do we have? As we've teased out that.
So here's the idea. We only have the biggest ones. The blockbusters, if you will.
That's it. But you've got 100 copies, so
Yes.
you're never out.
Right,
There you
exactly.
No, go back one step. Where were we in the conversation before that?
Yes.
Todd was saying.
So year 2020, we certainly will work to hit on imagination, but we've really, when we started out doing this podcast 5 years ago, we really pushed a lot of the films and talked about some of the historical aspects of the park. We are entering a new phase here where we've been through a lot of the films and we continue to release those, and we got some great things, but we're turning a corner into the world of video. And turning a corner in terms of the eras that we talk about, and then we enter into the term retro. So with that, I think it's going to be the year of the video. It's going to be a year of new films. Hal's got an unbelievable cache that he has given to us to restore, which majority are done. We need to prep them for the web and get them out to you. So I think we can start to incorporate some of the things that we see in these videos in the discussions as well. So, I'm really looking forward to going over there. So there's a lot of stuff.
And subscribe to us on YouTube because you want to be alerted
Yes.
when this stuff uploads. It's going to be
Right.
there. We're going to start pushing it more. Check this out, Retro WDW on YouTube.
Now, with that said, it will be after the event, as Brian had indicated. We will be back on this another episode of this after the event. We are really focusing on producing the highest quality event we can. So a lot of these videos and things we're talking about will come out later in the year and into next year. But
We've
we're
staged
really
50
looking forward-
podcasts, and we'll stage 50 more, but after our event.
That's right. Exactly. So with that, guys, we will see everybody back after RetroMagic. So again,
Or for the lucky of you, we'll see you at RetroMagic.
That's right. So we'll definitely be back after that, probably in the early November timeframe after we get back.
Todd's really excited for you all to see the gift, too.
I am. I always like putting the gifts together. It's always fun.
He's like Michael Jackson and Captain EO.
And a gift.
He's got a blue elephant friend? What?
I mean, we found the homing beacon.
That's right.
We got the map.
Everybody thinks we're a joke in the Academy. Not this time.
Just need the But anyway, we thank everybody as always. If you can, give us a shout out in iTunes if possible. If you can, come join us on October 13th for RetroMagic. Just head over to retromagic.net. Tons of stuff, great eats, great people to meet, VIPs, historic ballroom, and more. And we hope to see you there. Other than that, we will see you in early November. And with that, Brian, take us out.
Follow the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society on Twitter and Instagram at LBV History and on the web at lbvhistory.org. Follow Todd McCartney and Retro WDW on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Retro WDW. For all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at retrowdw.com. On Twitter, follow our web designer, Jason Bartel of Deepwater Studios, at JasonDWS. Our announcer, Andre Gardner, at Andre Gardner. And follow our hosts, Hal Bowers, on Twitter and Instagram, at GoAwayGreen, and on the web at kingdomofmemories.com. For JT Cougar on Twitter, at LS1JT, on YouTube at Rubber City Motoring, and on the web at rubbercitymotoring.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Brian P. Miles. Retro Disney World is the monthly podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society, a nonprofit, nonpartisan, tax-exempt 501c3 organization, and is not affiliated in any way with the Walt Disney Corporation or any of its subsidiary or affiliated entities.